She was Disney's golden girl, loved by millions and seen as the perfect American icon. But behind the fame, Annette Funicello carried a secret she never shared until the very end. For the first time, we're uncovering the emotional confession Annette made about the people she secretly hated, including some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Stick with us as we reveal the untold story behind it all. Walt Disney. Annette Funicello was once seen as the perfect girl next door. For millions of Americans, she was the sweet, smiling star they watched grow up on their TV screens. But behind that sweet smile was a life shaped by strict rules, silent control, and choices that were never really hers to make. It all started when she was just 12 years old. Walt Disney himself discovered her at a school dance recital. He thought she had the perfect look for the new show he was creating. With her big brown eyes, dark curls, and gentle voice, she fit exactly what Disney wanted. An innocent, all-American girl that parents across the country could trust. Overnight, Annette became one of the most popular Mouseketeers on the show. Children loved her. Adults adored her. She wasn't loud or wild like some child stars. She was sweet, polite, and soft-spoken. And that's exactly how Disney wanted her to stay. Walt Disney took Annette's image very seriously. He often talked about her in interviews, calling her America's sweetheart. But one quote stood out from the rest. Walt once told reporters, "Annette is a symbol of purity." Those 4 words shaped the rest of her life. From that moment on, Annette wasn't just a child actress, she was a brand. And Disney was determined to protect that brand at any cost. As Annette grew older, she naturally wanted to explore new styles and take on more grown-up roles. But working for Disney wasn't like working for just any film company. Disney controlled everything about her image. Even small things, like changing her hairstyle, required approval. Not just from her manager, but also from the studio, and finally, from Walt Disney himself. It didn't matter if she was 16 or 20. If Annette wanted to wear her hair in curls instead of straight, she had to ask permission. If she wanted bangs, she had to ask permission. This control didn't stop with just her hair. The clothes she wore were also carefully chosen to keep her image innocent. She was never allowed to wear anything too revealing. Even at the beach, she was forced to wear one-piece swimsuits or long-sleeve tops, even when other girls her age were wearing bikinis. Dating was another problem. Annette was a teenager. Of course, she wanted to go on dates like any other girl, but if the press ever caught her with a boyfriend, Disney's legal team would immediately step in to protect her image. Once, when rumors spread about her relationship with singer Anka, Disney sent warning letters to magazines threatening lawsuits if they printed anything about it. To the public, Annette was the perfect girl. Behind the scenes, she was trapped in a life where she couldn't even go to dinner with someone without risking her career. She was often offered roles in films that could have helped her break out of the Disney good girl image. But every time she wanted to take a risk, the answer from Disney was always the same. No. She wasn't allowed to play villains. She wasn't allowed to kiss co-stars on screen, even when one of them was her real-life boyfriend. Walt Disney didn't want Annette to grow up. He wanted her to stay exactly the same. A sweet little girl who never made mistakes and never changed. For years, Annette obeyed all the rules. She smiled for the cameras. She dressed the way they told her. She avoided interviews that might cause trouble. But deep down, she knew this life wasn't really hers. It all became clear during one meeting with Walt Disney. By that time, Annette was working on the Beach Party film series. She thought maybe finally she would get to show another side of herself, something more grown up, something more real. But Disney had other plans. During that meeting, Walt Disney gave her a gold ring. Inside the band, there was just one simple engraving, the letter A. It was supposed to be a gift, a sign of their close relationship. But the message behind it was clear. Disney didn't give her that ring because he loved her like family. He gave it to remind her, "You belong to us." Annette described her life during those years with one powerful phrase. It wasn't gratitude, it was a diamond prison. On the outside, it looked beautiful. She had fame, success, and wealth. But none of it belonged to her, not really. She was living inside a perfect image created by someone else, and the key to escape was nowhere to be found. What made it worse was that Walt Disney wasn't cruel in the way people expect powerful men to be cruel. He didn't yell at her, he didn't threaten her. Instead, he did something even worse. He smiled. His control wasn't loud or violent, it was quiet, polite, and impossible to fight. In her final years, Annette gave Walt Disney a nickname in her private notebook, the Magic Man. To the rest of the world, he was the man who created childhood joy and happiness. But to her, he was the man who trapped her in an image that wasn't her own. She later said, "He didn't love me. He loved my image." But Annette's heartbreak didn't stop with Disney. And next came the betrayal that hit even closer to home. Frankie Avalon. For most people, the beach party movies looked like fun. Sunny beaches, dancing teenagers, surfboards, laughter, and catchy songs. And standing in the middle of it all was Annette Funicello, the sweet-faced girl America had grown up watching, and her charming co-star, Frankie Avalon. But behind the bright colors and playful music, Annette's experience filming those movies was nothing like what the audience saw. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't a fresh start. It wasn't even acting. It was another cage, just like the one Disney had built for her, but this one came with a smile. Annette had thought these movies would finally let her grow. After spending years being treated like a little girl under Disney's thumb, she was excited by the chance to take on more mature roles. The Beach Party films, starting with Beach Party in 1963, seemed like her big break. No more poodle skirts and childish songs. This was her chance to show that she was a woman, not just the Mouseketeer everyone remembered. But it didn't take long for Annette to realize the truth. These movies weren't about her at all. They were about Frankie. Frankie Avalon, with his slicked-back hair and smooth voice, was already being called America's teenage dream. And on camera, Annette was just the sweet, smiling girl placed next to him to make him look better. She didn't get to explore new characters. She didn't get dramatic scenes. She was there to giggle, smile, and play the nice girl on the sidelines. Later, she would write the words that summed it up best. "I wasn't an actress. I was a prop." There's one story that shows just how trapped Annette felt in those films. During one of the shoots, Annette finally worked up the courage to try something new. She wanted to wear a two-piece bikini like the other actresses in the movie. She thought maybe it would help her step out of the good girl role just a little and show that she was growing up. The director actually said yes. He supported her decision. Annette was excited. It seemed like a small step, but to her, it was a big one. But then, Frankie Avalon showed up. Without a word, Frankie walked into the dressing room, picked up the bikini, and threw it in the trash. Then he looked her in the eye and said, "You're Annette, not Jane Mansfield." Jane Mansfield, of course, was known for her bold, sexy image. Annette was supposed to be the opposite of that. Frankie made sure she stayed that way. The next thing she knew, a full-body wetsuit was handed to her, the kind that covered her from her neck to her knees. That was what she wore for the scene instead of the bikini. Annette swallowed her frustration. At the time, she told herself that maybe Frankie was just trying to protect her image. Maybe he thought he was helping. But as the years went by, she realized the truth. It wasn't protection, it was control. Frankie didn't want her to shine. He wanted her to stay in his shadow, harmless and pretty, while he got to be the star. The deepest wound came when Annette became pregnant during the filming of one of the later Beach Party movies. Pregnancy is supposed to be a special, beautiful moment in a woman's life. Annette was excited but also nervous. She knew it would be a challenge to work on set while carrying a child. But instead of support, she faced betrayal. Frankie Avalon, the same man who smiled and hugged her in public, went behind her back to the producers and told them to reduce her close-up scenes. Why? Because, in his words, she's not attractive anymore. Those 4 words cut deeper than any insult she had ever heard. She wasn't attractive because she was carrying life. She wasn't attractive because she wasn't skinny enough to fit Frankie's perfect on-screen image anymore. That comment shattered something inside her. Not because she needed male approval, but because it showed how little he actually cared for her as a person. She later wrote, "He didn't need to yell at me. He just had to smile for the cameras, then look at me like I was a shadow blurring the frame." And yet, to the public, Frankie Avalon was still the perfect co-star. Whenever people asked him about Annette, he would grin and say, "I loved her like a sister." But Annette didn't believe it for a second. Her bitter response said it all. "If I was his sister, then he was the kind who pinned me to the stage just to stay center frame." Frankie Avalon was America's teenage dream, but to Annette, he was a dream that slowly turned into a nightmare. And the next betrayal wasn't from a man, it was from another woman. Shelly Fab. If there was anyone who could rival Annette Funicello in terms of beauty, charm, and popularity on screen, it was Shelly Fab. They were like 2 versions of the same American dream. Sweet, talented, and beautiful young women who seemed to be the perfect friends on and off screen. Audiences loved seeing them together. The 2 beachside sweethearts, dancing around on the sand, smiling and laughing, were like a poster for 1960s pop culture. 2 Disney-grown princesses living the dream. At first, Annette thought she had a real ally in Shelly. They worked together in the beach party movies. They went to the same parties. They smiled in all the publicity photos like they had been best friends since childhood. But the truth started to show quickly. Annette noticed something. Whenever there was a director on set, Shelly was always nearby, always whispering to someone, standing just behind the assistant, always perfectly positioned to have the director's ear. It wasn't just coincidence, it was strategy. Annette later wrote, "She was always whispering near the director. It didn't take yelling, it didn't take fights, just a quiet whisper at the right moment. Just a soft word in the right ear." And little by little, Annette realized that Shelly wasn't just competing with her. She was working against her. One moment stood out in Annette's memory more than the others. They were filming a scene on the beach. Annette had to run across the sand while the cameras rolled. The sand was uneven, and as she ran, she lost her footing. She fell hard, scraping her knees and hands on the rough sand. Blood ran down her leg. The film crew froze for a second. Some of them rushed to help. Others just stood there in shock. But Shelly? Shelly laughed. Not just a giggle, but full applause. She actually clapped and said loudly, "Give her an Emmy!" It wasn't a joke between friends. It wasn't funny to Annette. It was cruel. It was humiliating. Here she was, hurt and embarrassed, and her friend was making a show of it, as if Annette's pain was a joke that deserved applause. Later that night, after the cameras stopped rolling, Shelly sent flowers to Annette's dressing room. The card on the bouquet read, "You've always been my inspiration. Wishing you a speedy recovery." Annette kept that card for decades, not because it was sweet, but because it was fake. She kept it to remind herself never to trust pretty words from people who smile while they hurt you. But the worst betrayal wasn't on the beach. It happened later, off the sand, behind closed doors in Hollywood. Annette had been offered a major role in a TV drama. It was finally her chance to break free from the Disney image, the sweet, obedient girl everyone expected her to be. This was her shot at proving she was a real actress, capable of serious work. But right before contracts were signed, the phone rang. The producers had changed their minds. "We're going with Shelly. She's sharper, more mature." No one had to explain what happened. Annette knew. Shelly had been whispering again, talking to the right people, positioning herself to steal the opportunity. She didn't need to confront Annette or even speak to her. She just did it quietly, and she did it well. Annette was so devastated that she smashed a mirror in her dressing room that night. It wasn't just about losing the role, it was about losing herself. Every time she tried to grow beyond her nice girl image, someone else was there pulling her back down, reminding her of her place. The betrayal didn't come with shouting. It came with flowers, smiles, and soft-spoken lies. And after Shelly's betrayal, the pain didn't stop. It just moved into a new chapter, one where love itself would become the next wound. Paul Anka. Of all the heartbreaks Annette Funicello faced in her life, the one with Paul Anka left a scar deeper than most people ever knew. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic in the tabloids at the time. It was the kind of betrayal that sneaks up quietly and leaves you broken when no one's looking. From the outside, their story looked like the perfect teen romance. Two young stars, two names everyone loved. Annette was America's sweetheart. Paul Anka was the heartthrob singer every girl had posters of in their bedroom. And then came the song Puppy Love. It was soft, sweet, and emotional. And because of Annette's connection with Paul, the world believed Puppy Love was written for her. The idea made headlines. Teenage fans swooned over the thought of Paul singing his heart out to America's most perfect girl. But Annette knew something that the public didn't. I wasn't the love in that song. I was just the name that helped it sell 1 million records. Paul never denied the rumors, because letting people believe the song was about Annette helped boost his career. He didn't protect her from the attention, and he didn't stop the headlines from making it seem like they were star-crossed lovers. Behind the songs and smiles, Annette was just another tool for publicity, a name to sell more records. And while the public kept believing the fairy tale, Annette was watching the real story fall apart. Paul Anka was charming. He was good at saying the right words at the right moments. For a while, Annette believed him. She believed that he was different from the men she worked with in Hollywood. He wasn't her co-star. He wasn't part of the Disney machine. He was a singer, an artist, someone who seemed to really understand her loneliness behind the cameras. But it wasn't real. Their romance never fully happened in the public eye because Disney wouldn't allow it. Walt Disney's team worked overtime, making sure Annette's public image stayed pure, innocent, and untouched by rumors of scandal or rebellion. Being seen as in love with a popular singer didn't fit that perfect mold. Behind closed doors, though, Annette and Paul spent time together. Quiet talks, gentle moments, secret birthday cards exchanged between shows. But it all felt like stolen time, always hidden, always careful. For Annette, it felt exciting at first. It felt like maybe she was finally finding someone outside of Disney's control. Someone who really saw her as a woman, not just as America's good little girl. But she was wrong. And that truth would break her in the worst way possible. The worst moment between them didn't happen under flashing cameras. It happened in a quiet backstage room in Palm Springs. It was Annette's birthday, and she had just given Paul a handwritten card. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a small piece of her heart, hoping for something real in return. Then she saw him. Paul, standing with his arms around a blonde model, laughing, flirting, completely ignoring the fact that Annette was even in the room. He didn't even bother to hide it. The moment was so raw, so crushing, that Annette didn't even cry right away. She just froze. That night, she went back to her room and took out a stack of unsent love letters she'd written for him. Letters she never had the courage to give him. Letters full of the thoughts she could never say out loud. One by one, she tore them up. Piece by piece, every hope she had in him was ripped apart in silence. Nobody saw it happen. There were no photographers there, no headlines the next morning. But that moment was one of the clearest heartbreaks of her life. Years later, long after the romance rumors had faded and the world had moved on, Paul delivered one more cut, but this one was public. In a 1971 interview, someone asked Paul Anka if he had ever really loved Annette Funicello. He could have been kind. He could have given a polite answer and moved past it with grace. Instead, he smiled and said, "She's the kind of girl everyone wants to marry, but no one dates." It was brutal. It was a joke to him, a throwaway comment. But for Annette, it was devastating. "A blade that severed every shred of worth I thought I had," she wrote in her diary. For years, Annette had struggled with the way people saw her, as the nice girl, the sweetheart, the one you respect but don't really want. Paul had been her escape from that image, or so she thought. And now, with one careless comment, he confirmed her worst fear. She was good enough to sell records, good enough to help boost someone else's fame, but not good enough to love openly. He embarrassed her in front of the world. And the worst part? He never apologized. Not once. Out of all her betrayals, this one taught Annette something she carried for the rest of her life. I loved a song, not a man. It wasn't Paul that she loved. It was the fantasy, the idea that maybe one day someone would see her fully, love her completely, not as a product, not as a Disney doll, but as a whole person. Paul used her innocence. He used the sweetness the public adored to help boost his own stardom. And once he didn't need that anymore, he tossed it aside like it was nothing. For Annette, it was another hard lesson about fame. Women in that industry were often seen as decorations, not as main characters. Beautiful faces for album sales. Inspiration for songs, but never truly written into the story. But the next betrayal wouldn't be about romance. It would be about reflection, and the co-star who became the mirror of everything Annette feared about herself. Tommy Kirk. Out of all the people in Annette Funicello's life, Tommy Kirk was not a villain. He wasn't a backstabbing friend. He wasn't a jealous rival. He wasn't someone who betrayed her for fame. But his name still sat on Annette's private list of people who left scars on her heart. Not because of what he did, but because of what she didn't do. Before everything fell apart, Annette and Tommy were a perfect Hollywood pair. Fans loved seeing them together in movies like The Shaggy Dog and Swiss Family Robinson. They were the teenage faces of Disney's ideal world. Polite, clean-cut, wholesome, and sweet. The audience bought into the illusion that they might even be dating in real life. They weren't, but they were close. They shared the same pressure, the same expectations, and the same feeling of being trapped in Disney's carefully managed world. Tommy Kirk was talented. He could act. He could deliver funny lines, emotional scenes, and heroic gestures. Walt Disney himself once said Tommy had that all-American look, and it seemed like Tommy's future would be just as golden as Annette's. Then everything changed. In the early 1960s, Disney found out something they didn't like about Tommy. He was gay. That was all it took. Back then, being gay wasn't just frowned upon. It was the end of a career in Hollywood, especially at a family-friendly studio like Disney. Tommy's exile from Disney was fast and brutal. The same studio that had praised him for years suddenly erased him like a mistake on a chalkboard. One moment, he was a beloved star. The next, he was a scandal they didn't want anyone to talk about. No goodbye party, no official announcement, just silence and rejection. For Annette, watching this happen was like seeing the walls of her safe little world start to crack. It was the first time she fully realized how fake the magic of Disney really was. They didn't protect you. They didn't stand by you. If you didn't fit their perfect picture, they cut you out. And Annette knew something even worse. She didn't say anything. She didn't speak up. Most of the names in Annette's private notebook, the list she kept of people who hurt her, were people who betrayed her for selfish reasons. Paul Anka humiliated her. Shelly Fab undercut her. Frankie Avalon made her feel small. But Tommy Kirk's name was there for a completely different reason. It wasn't his betrayal. It was hers. Annette wasn't angry at Tommy. She loved him like a brother. What made his name sit heavy on that list was her guilt. I stayed silent. I didn't dare defend him. If I spoke, I'd fall next, she later wrote in one of her private reflections. She knew exactly how fragile her place at Disney really was. She had already been called a symbol of purity by Walt Disney himself. She was the good girl of the studio, the perfect, smiling poster child. If she had stood up and defended Tommy, she was sure she would have been next. Her career would have ended before it even properly began. So, she smiled. She kept quiet. She showed up for filming. She didn't mention Tommy's name to anyone in public, and inside, that silence ate at her for the rest of her life. Annette's guilt didn't come from cruelty. It came from fear. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. Years later, Annette would write in her diary that, "Tommy was the crack in the Disney mirror I tried to believe was flawless. Disney sold a perfect world. Songs, smiles, sunny days, family fun." Annette had spent her whole childhood believing in it, or at least pretending to. But when they threw Tommy away, that perfect picture shattered. What broke her wasn't just the studio's betrayal of Tommy. It was the fact that she went along with it. In her heart, she hated what Tommy reminded her about herself. She hated seeing his name in the press with cruel words written next to it. She hated that the boy who used to make her laugh on set was now being whispered about as if he were a disease. But more than anything, she hated that deep down, she had made a choice: career over courage. Tommy's fall was a mirror. Every time she looked at him or heard his name, it reflected her own silence. It reflected the parts of her that were scared, obedient, and complicit in a system that chewed people up and smiled while doing it. Ultimate guilt. Not for what she did, but for what she didn't do. Tommy Kirk's exile was a painful lesson for Annette about how Hollywood really worked. Fame wasn't about talent. It wasn't about loyalty. It wasn't about family, no matter how much the Disney machine tried to sell that image. "We're never free, even when smiling in front of millions," Annette once told a close friend. The truth was ugly. Hollywood's version of purity wasn't real. It was something created by powerful men in boardrooms. It was a costume, a role, just like any other part an actor played. And when someone didn't fit that costume, when someone's truth didn't match the story being sold, they were replaced, erased, forgotten. Annette carried that shame with her for years, and Tommy's story haunted her because it reminded her that innocence in Hollywood was often nothing more than a script written by people who never had to live with the consequences of their cruelty. Tommy never got an apology. Neither did Annette. Both of them were victims of a system that smiled at the audience while cutting people apart behind the curtain. If you liked this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. More Untold stories are coming soon.